Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly around the military training facility, its harsh landscape broken only by the occasional Joshua tree and the geometric patterns of obstacle courses scattered across the sandy terrain. She had been here for 18 months now, longer than any previous assignment, but today felt different somehow. The morning air still held a slight chill, though she knew that within hours the temperature would climb to over 100 degrees. Sarah adjusted her combat vest and checked her equipment one final time. Today's exercise was supposed to be routine, just another points accumulating drill that would add to her growing collection of commendations and certifications. She had become something of a perfectionist when it came to training scenarios, earning the unofficial title of points queen among her fellow trainees. Her commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Williams, had always praised her attention to detail and her ability to follow protocols exactly as written. Sarah took pride in this reputation. She came from a family where precision mattered. Her father had been an engineer, her mother a surgeon, and both had instilled in her the belief that success came from careful preparation and flawless execution. The training facility buzzed with activity as teams prepared for the day's exercises. Sarah belonged to Bravo Team, a mixed unit of Army, Navy, and Air Force personnel who had been training together for the past 6 months. They had developed a comfortable rhythm, each member knowing their role precisely. Sarah typically handled communications and logistics support, coordinating between different units and ensuring that supply lines remained intact during simulated operations. She enjoyed this role because it allowed her to contribute meaningfully while staying in her comfort zone. Sarah had joined the military not out of any burning desire for combat, but because she wanted to serve her country and because the structured environment appealed to her methodical nature. The military had provided her with clear goals, measurable achievements, and a sense of purpose that she had found lacking in civilian life. As she walked toward the briefing area, Sarah noticed an unusual amount of activity around the communications center. Several officers were speaking in hushed tones, their faces serious in a way that went beyond typical training exercise intensity. She caught fragments of conversation about real-world situations and immediate deployment readiness, but she didn't think much of it. Military personnel were always discussing hypothetical scenarios and emergency protocols. The briefing tent was already crowded when Sarah arrived. She found her usual spot near the back, where she could see the presentation screens clearly while staying out of the spotlight. Lieutenant Colonel Williams stood at the front of the tent, but next to him was someone Sarah didn't recognize, a man with weathered features and intense eyes who wore the distinctive uniform markings of a Navy SEAL. "Listen up, people," Lieutenant Colonel Williams began, his voice carrying the authority that came from years of command experience. "Today's exercise is going to be different from what you're used to. We're implementing a new training protocol that's designed to test your adaptability under unexpected circumstances." The SEAL stepped forward, and Sarah noticed that despite his relatively modest height, he commanded immediate attention from everyone in the tent. His presence seemed to fill the space in a way that went beyond physical dimensions. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried an underlying intensity that made everyone lean forward slightly. "I'm Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson," he said, his eyes scanning the assembled trainees. "I've been brought in to evaluate your unit's readiness for advanced operations. What that means is that today's exercise won't follow the standard protocols you've been training with. You'll need to adapt, improvise, and make decisions based on incomplete information." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She thrived in environments where she knew exactly what was expected of her, where she could study the requirements ahead of time and prepare accordingly. The idea of improvisation made her uncomfortable, but she reminded herself that this was still just a training exercise. Whatever challenges they presented, they would be carefully designed and monitored for safety. Master Chief Jackson continued his briefing, outlining a complex scenario involving a humanitarian crisis in a fictional Middle Eastern country. The details were more intricate than usual training scenarios, with political complications, civilian populations, and multiple opposing forces. As he spoke, Sarah took careful notes, trying to absorb every detail that might be relevant to her communications role. The scenario involved a medical emergency at a remote outpost where international aid workers had been providing assistance to refugees. Communications had been lost, supply lines had been disrupted, and hostile forces were reportedly moving in the area. The training teams would need to establish contact, assess the situation, and coordinate an appropriate response. "Your mission parameters will evolve based on the information you gather," Master Chief Jackson explained. There's no predetermined correct solution to this scenario. Success will be measured by your ability to work together, think creatively, and maintain focus under pressure. After the briefing ended, Sarah joined her teammates for equipment check and final preparations. The familiar routine of inspecting gear and reviewing communication protocols helped calm her nerves. She had performed these same tasks hundreds of times, and the muscle memory provided comfort in the face of uncertainty. Her team leader, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, gathered the group around a tactical map spread across a folding table. Rodriguez was a veteran with 2 combat deployments who had a reputation for being both demanding and fair. He had taken Sarah under his wing when she first joined the unit, recognizing her potential while also understanding her limitations. "Martinez," Rodriguez said, pointing to a position on the map, "you'll be managing communications from the forward command post. But I want you to be ready to move if the situation changes. Today's exercise sounds like it might throw us some curveballs." Sarah nodded, though privately she hoped she wouldn't need to leave the relative safety and familiarity of the command post. She had trained for field operations, of course, but her strengths lay in coordination and analysis rather than direct action. She was more comfortable with radios and computers than with rifles and explosives. As the teams moved out to their starting positions, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about today's exercise. The usually jovial atmosphere among the training staff had been replaced by a tense professionalism that felt almost too real. Even the weather seemed to be cooperating in an unusual way, with cloud cover that provided natural concealment and wind patterns that would affect communications. The forward command post was located in a small building that had been constructed to simulate a field headquarters. It contained sophisticated communication equipment, computer terminals, and large displays showing maps and real-time data feeds. Sarah settled into her designated position and began the process of establishing contact with all units participating in the exercise. The first hour proceeded normally. Teams checked in regularly, reported their positions, and requested routine updates about the scenario. Sarah felt herself relaxing as she fell into familiar patterns of coordination and data management. This might be different from previous exercises, but the fundamental skills remained the same. Then, Master Chief Jackson appeared in the command post, moving with the silent efficiency that seemed to be his trademark. He didn't say anything at first, just observed the ongoing operations with those intense eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Sarah became acutely aware of his presence, double-checking her procedures to ensure everything was being handled correctly. "How are communications holding up?" he asked, directing the question to Sarah specifically. "All units are reporting in on schedule, Master Chief," she replied, proud that her voice remained steady despite her nervousness. "We have clear signals with all forward elements, and backup systems are standing by." He nodded, then moved to one of the computer terminals to review the tactical display. Sarah noticed that he seemed particularly interested in updates from the simulated crisis area, asking detailed questions about the timeline of events and the reliability of incoming information. "Martinez," he said suddenly, turning back toward her, "what's your assessment of the situation at the aid station?" Sarah consulted her notes and the incoming reports. Based on the last communication we received, they had approximately 30 civilians requiring medical attention, but their medical supplies were running low. They requested immediate resupply and evacuation support for the most critical cases. "And what does your gut tell you about that request?" Master Chief Jackson asked, his question catching Sarah off guard. "My gut, Master Chief?" Sarah wasn't sure how to respond to such a subjective question during a military briefing. "Yes, your instincts. Sometimes the most important information isn't in the official reports. What do you sense about what's really happening out there?" Sarah paused, considering the question seriously. She had noticed some inconsistencies in the timing of reports and subtle changes in the radio operators' voices, but she had assumed these were just normal variations in training exercise procedures. There seemed to be some urgency in the last few transmissions that went beyond the scripted scenario, she admitted hesitantly. The radio operator sounded genuinely stressed, not like someone following a training protocol. Master Chief Jackson's expression didn't change, but Sarah thought she saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Good observation. Trust those instincts, Martinez. In real operations, sometimes the things that feel wrong are the most important signals you'll receive." Before Sarah could ask what he meant by real operations, the radio crackled with an incoming transmission that immediately commanded everyone's attention. The voice on the other end was tense, urgent, and definitely not following any training script Sarah had ever heard. "Command, this is Outpost Charlie. We have a real-world emergency situation. Multiple casualties, hostile forces confirmed in the area. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The silence in the command post was deafening after the radio transmission ended. Sarah stared at the communication console, her finger frozen above the response button, as her mind struggled to process what she had just heard. Around her, the other personnel had stopped their routine activities and were looking between the radio and Master Chief Jackson with expressions that ranged from confusion to dawning realization. "That wasn't part of the exercise," Sergeant Rodriguez said quietly, voicing what everyone was thinking but afraid to confirm. Master Chief Jackson was already moving toward the radio equipment, his demeanor shifting from training observer to active operator with startling speed. The transformation was remarkable to watch. Gone was the measured, instructional presence of the past few hours, replaced by the focused intensity of someone who had faced real combat situations countless times before. "Martinez, get me a direct line to base command immediately," he ordered, his voice carrying an authority that made Sarah's previous nervousness seem trivial. "Rodriguez, I need a status report on all training units in the field. Find out if anyone else is receiving real-world communications." Sarah's hands moved across the communication controls with automatic precision, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought had temporarily failed. She had practiced these procedures hundreds of times, but never in a situation where the outcome truly mattered. The difference was overwhelming. Each button press, each frequency adjustment, each protocol selection carried weight that made her hyper-aware of every movement. The base command response came through almost immediately, confirming what Master Chief Jackson had already suspected. Outpost Charlie was a real medical station operated by an international humanitarian organization, located approximately 200 miles east of their training facility. It wasn't supposed to have any connection to their exercise, but somehow their communications had crossed frequencies with the actual emergency response network. "We have a genuine crisis situation," Master Chief Jackson announced to the command post staff. "Outpost Charlie is under attack by unidentified hostile forces. They have wounded civilians and aid workers, their communications are compromised, and they're requesting immediate military assistance." Sarah felt the world tilt slightly as the full implications of the situation became clear. This wasn't a training scenario with predetermined outcomes and safety protocols. Real people were in danger, possibly dying, while she sat in a comfortable command post coordinating what she had thought was just another exercise. The responsibility felt crushing. Lieutenant Colonel Williams appeared in the command post, having been summoned by the emergency communications. His face was grim as he consulted with Master Chief Jackson, their conversation conducted in the low, urgent tones of military professionals dealing with an active crisis. Sarah caught fragments of their discussion about jurisdiction, available resources, and the legal complexities of deploying training units to respond to real emergencies. "The nearest regular military forces are 6 hours away," Lieutenant Colonel Williams said, loud enough for the entire command post to hear. "The State Department is working through diplomatic channels, but that could take even longer. The people at that outpost don't have 6 hours." Master Chief Jackson turned to survey the assembled personnel. His gaze lingered on each person for a moment, as if he was making rapid assessments of their capabilities and readiness. When his eyes met Sarah's, she felt as if he was seeing straight through her, evaluating not just her technical skills but her character and resolve. "Martinez," he said, "I need you to establish and maintain continuous communication with Outpost Charlie. Find out exactly what they're dealing with, how many casualties they have, and what resources they need. Rodriguez, start coordinating with our field teams. We need to know what assets we have available and how quickly we can get them moving." The next hour passed in a blur of intense activity. Sarah found herself at the center of a complex web of communications, relaying information between the besieged outpost, base command, various government agencies, and the training units that were rapidly transforming into an actual rescue operation. Her carefully practiced protocols evolved and adapted to meet the demands of a real crisis, skills she didn't know she possessed emerging under pressure. The situation at Outpost Charlie was worse than initially reported. The facility was housing over 60 refugees who had fled violence in a neighboring region, along with 12 international aid workers and a small security team. The attacking force was larger and better equipped than first indicated, and they had cut the main road that served as the primary evacuation route. Through her headset, Sarah could hear the stress and fear in the voices of the people at the outpost, but also their determination to protect the civilians under their care. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the medical director, provided regular updates on casualties while simultaneously treating wounded patients. Her reports were clinical and precise, but Sarah could hear the emotional strain underneath the professional demeanor. "We have 7 people with serious injuries, 3 of them critical," Dr. Vasquez reported during one transmission. "Our surgical capabilities are limited, and we're running low on blood supplies. The security team is doing their best, but they're outnumbered and low on ammunition." Each update made the situation seem more desperate, and Sarah found herself becoming emotionally invested in the outcome in a way that no training exercise had ever affected her. These weren't actors following a script or fellow trainees competing for points. These were real people whose lives hung in the balance, and her role in coordinating their rescue felt simultaneously vital and terrifying. Master Chief Jackson had taken direct control of the operational response, working with Lieutenant Colonel Williams to deploy training units in a real-world mission. The legal and political complications were being handled at higher levels, but the immediate tactical response fell to the people in the command post and the field teams who had been conducting routine exercises just hours earlier. "We're putting together a quick reaction force," Master Chief Jackson explained to Sarah as he reviewed the tactical displays. "2 of our training teams have combat-experienced personnel and can provide immediate security support. But we need someone who can coordinate the medical evacuation and ensure continuous communication throughout the operation." Sarah nodded, assuming that someone with more experience would be assigned to that crucial role. She continued monitoring the communications and updating the tactical displays, grateful to contribute in a way that matched her training and abilities. The idea of leaving the safety of the command post to participate directly in the rescue operation never occurred to her. The rescue force consisted of 18 personnel from various training units, led by Master Chief Jackson and Sergeant Rodriguez. They had access to armored vehicles, medical equipment, and enough firepower to provide security for an evacuation operation. The plan was straightforward: establish a secure perimeter around the outpost, evacuate the most seriously wounded first, then organize the withdrawal of remaining civilians and aid workers. However, as often happens in military operations, the situation became more complicated as more information became available. Intelligence reports indicated that the attacking force was part of a larger insurgent group that had been conducting similar operations across the region. They were well-trained, heavily armed, and unlikely to withdraw simply because military forces arrived. This could turn into a sustained engagement, Master Chief Jackson warned the team as they prepared for deployment. "We need to be ready for the possibility that this won't be a simple evacuation. We might need to hold that position until additional forces arrive." Sarah felt a cold knot forming in her stomach as the implications of this revelation became clear. The rescue operation was evolving into something much larger and more dangerous than anyone had initially anticipated. The training units that were being deployed had skilled personnel, but they weren't equipped or prepared for a major combat engagement. The radio crackled with another transmission from Outpost Charlie, and Dr. Vasquez's voice carried a new note of urgency. "We can see vehicles approaching from the east. It looks like they're preparing for another assault. We need help immediately." Master Chief Jackson made a decision that would prove to be a turning point for everyone involved, including Sarah. "We can't wait for perfect conditions or additional resources," he announced. "We're going now with what we have." As the rescue team prepared for immediate deployment, Sarah realized that her role was about to change dramatically. The comfortable distance between training exercises and real-world consequences was disappearing, and she was about to discover capabilities within herself that she never knew existed. The sound of vehicles starting up outside the command post marked the beginning of an operation that would test everyone involved far beyond anything their training had prepared them for. Sarah remained at her communication station, but she could sense that her involvement in this crisis was far from over. Master Chief Jackson paused at the command post exit, turning back to look at Sarah with an expression that seemed to convey both confidence and concern. "Martinez, you've done excellent work coordinating communications. Stay sharp. This is just the beginning." As the rescue convoy disappeared into the desert landscape, Sarah found herself alone with the enormous responsibility of maintaining contact with both the rescue team and the besieged outpost. The weight of that responsibility was unlike anything she had experienced in her military career, but she was beginning to understand that extraordinary circumstances have a way of revealing extraordinary capabilities in ordinary people. The rescue convoy had been en route for 43 minutes when everything changed. Sarah was monitoring 3 different radio frequencies simultaneously, coordinating between the moving rescue team, the increasingly desperate outpost, and base command, when she heard the unmistakable sound of explosions echoing across the desert landscape. The radio chatter that followed painted a picture that made her blood run cold. "Command, this is Jackson," Master Chief's voice came through with the calm professionalism that Sarah was learning to recognize as his way of delivering the worst possible news. "We have a problem. The road to Outpost Charlie has been mined. We've lost 2 vehicles and have multiple casualties. Need immediate medical evacuation for our wounded." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the radio controls. In less than an hour, what had started as a rescue mission had become a disaster requiring its own rescue operation. The irony wasn't lost on her, but there wasn't time to dwell on it. She began coordinating emergency medical helicopters while simultaneously trying to establish alternative routes to reach the outpost. The situation was deteriorating rapidly on multiple fronts. The rescue team was pinned down by the improvised explosive devices, unable to advance or retreat safely. Meanwhile, communications from Outpost Charlie indicated that the insurgent forces had begun their second major assault. Dr. Vasquez's voice carried a note of desperation that cut through Sarah's professional detachment. "We can't hold much longer," the doctor reported. "They've breached the outer perimeter. We're moving everyone into the main building, but it's not designed to withstand this kind of attack. Some of the wounded can't be moved safely." Sarah found herself making decisions that went far beyond her training and experience. She coordinated with helicopter pilots to establish landing zones, worked with base command to deploy additional resources, and maintained constant communication with both crisis sites simultaneously. Each decision carried enormous weight, and she was acutely aware that mistakes could cost lives. Lieutenant Colonel Williams returned to the command post with updates from higher headquarters that offered both hope and additional complications. "Washington is treating this as a priority situation," he informed Sarah. "We're getting full support for the rescue operation, but the political ramifications are significant. There are international diplomatic considerations that could affect how we proceed." Sarah wanted to scream that diplomatic considerations were irrelevant when people were dying, but she understood that military operations existed within larger political contexts. Instead, she focused on what she could control, maintaining communications and ensuring that accurate information reached decision-makers at all levels. The medical evacuation helicopters arrived to extract the wounded from the rescue convoy, but their presence created new tactical challenges. The aircraft were vulnerable during loading operations, requiring additional security that further reduced the forces available for the rescue mission. Sarah found herself calculating casualty rates and resource allocations with a cold efficiency that surprised her. Master Chief Jackson's voice came through the radio with a new plan that reflected the changing tactical situation. "We're going to establish a forward operating base here and continue to the outpost on foot. The terrain is too dangerous for vehicles, but a small team might be able to reach them through the rocky areas to the north." The plan was dangerous, requiring the rescue team to traverse several miles of hostile territory with limited support. Sarah realized that her role as communications coordinator was about to become even more critical. She would be the lifeline connecting the advancing rescue team with medical support, tactical intelligence, and extraction resources. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah began to understand that the crisis was testing not just her technical skills, but her emotional resilience and moral courage. Each radio transmission brought new challenges that required rapid decisions with incomplete information. She was operating in a gray area between training protocols and real-world chaos, developing capabilities she never knew she possessed. The breakthrough came when Sarah detected a pattern in the insurgent communications that suggested their forces were divided between the outpost assault and monitoring the road where the rescue convoy had been ambushed. She realized that there might be a narrow window of opportunity if the rescue team could approach the outpost during a shift change in the insurgent positions. "Master Chief, I think I've found something," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "The hostile forces appear to be operating on a rotation schedule. If you can time your approach with their 1800 hours personnel change, you might have a 20-minute window with reduced opposition." The silence on the radio stretched for several seconds before Master Chief Jackson responded. "Martinez, that's excellent intelligence analysis. How confident are you in that assessment?" Sarah reviewed her notes and the intercepted communications one more time. About 70% confident, Master Chief. It's based on communication patterns and movement reports from the outpost, but the timing seems consistent. 70% is better odds than we've had all day, came the reply. We're going to act on your intelligence. Keep monitoring those communications and let us know if anything changes. The weight of responsibility that settled on Sarah's shoulders was unlike anything she had experienced. The success of the rescue operation, and possibly the lives of everyone at Outpost Charlie, now depended in part on her analysis of radio intercepts and tactical patterns. It was the kind of responsibility that military training tried to prepare people for, but which couldn't truly be understood until experienced firsthand. The next 2 hours required Sarah to maintain focus and precision while dealing with stress levels that pushed her far beyond her comfort zone. She coordinated helicopter support, monitored multiple communication frequencies, tracked the movement of friendly and hostile forces, and provided real-time intelligence updates to the rescue team as they advanced across dangerous terrain. Dr. Vasquez's voice from Outpost Charlie became increasingly strained as the insurgent assault intensified. We've lost the generator. Emergency lighting only. Medical equipment is failing. If help doesn't arrive soon, we're going to lose people who could otherwise be saved. Sarah found herself fighting back tears as she relayed the doctor's reports to the rescue team and base command. The clinical language of military communications couldn't disguise the human cost of the delays and complications that had plagued the operation. Real people were suffering and dying while she coordinated responses from the relative safety of the command post. The radio crackled with Master Chief Jackson's voice as the rescue team reached the final approach to Outpost Charlie. We have visual contact with the target building. Insurgent forces are concentrated on the south and west sides. We're going to attempt entry through the north wall. Sarah held her breath as she listened to the tactical communications that followed. The rescue team was moving into direct contact with hostile forces, and her role was shifting from coordination to real-time combat support. She monitored emergency medical frequencies, tracked ammunition resupply requirements, and maintained contact with extraction aircraft that were standing by just outside the combat zone. The breakthrough came with startling suddenness. Command, this is Jackson. We're inside the building. Making contact with Dr. Vasquez now. Beginning immediate medical triage and evacuation preparation. Relief flooded through Sarah, but she knew that the most dangerous phase of the operation was just beginning. Getting into the outpost was only the first step. They still had to stabilize the wounded, organize the evacuation of over 60 civilians, and extract the entire group through territory controlled by hostile forces. Master Chief Jackson's next transmission contained information that would fundamentally change Sarah's role in the operation. Martinez, we need a communications specialist on site to coordinate the evacuation. The equipment here is damaged, and we need someone who can manage multiple frequencies while we focus on security. How quickly can you get here? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah stared at the radio equipment that had been her world for the past several hours, trying to process what Master Chief Jackson was asking. He wanted her to leave the safety of the command post and join the rescue operation in an active combat zone. Lieutenant Colonel Williams appeared at her side, having heard the transmission. Martinez, this has to be your decision. I can't order you to deploy into a combat situation that goes beyond your training parameters. Sarah looked around the command post that had been her sanctuary throughout the crisis. The sophisticated equipment, the secure communications, the layers of protection that separated her from the immediate dangers facing the people she had been trying to help. She realized that all of her training, all of her careful preparation and point accumulation, had been leading to this moment when she would have to choose between safety and service. The radio crackled again with Dr. Vasquez's voice, weak but determined. We have 3 people who won't survive transport unless we can establish better communication with the medical evacuation teams. We need precise coordination of their care during extraction. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. When she opened them again, her voice was steady and clear. Master Chief, I can be there in 30 minutes if you can secure a landing zone for the helicopter. The transformation was remarkable. In that instant, Sarah stopped being a trainee accumulating points and became a soldier accepting a dangerous mission because it was necessary. The fear didn't disappear, but it was overshadowed by a sense of purpose that she had never experienced before. Lieutenant Colonel Williams nodded approvingly as she began gathering the communication equipment she would need for the forward deployment. "Martinez, you've shown exceptional courage and competence today. Trust your training and your instincts." As Sarah prepared to leave the safety of the command post for a combat zone where her skills were desperately needed, she understood that she was crossing a threshold that would fundamentally change her understanding of herself and her capabilities. The helicopter engines were already spinning up outside, and Master Chief Jackson was waiting for her arrival to coordinate an evacuation that could save dozens of lives. The moment had arrived when training would become reality, and Sarah Martinez was about to discover what she was truly capable of when everything depended on her performance. The helicopter ride to Outpost Charlie was unlike anything Sarah had experienced during training flights. The aircraft flew low and fast, using the desert terrain to mask its approach from potential hostile fire. Through the open door, she could see smoke rising from several locations, evidence of the ongoing battle that had been raging for hours. The professional calm of the flight crew contrasted sharply with the knot of fear and anticipation in her stomach. Sarah's hands remained steady as she checked her communication equipment one final time, but her mind raced with doubts about her decision. She had never been deployed into an active combat zone, never faced the possibility of enemy fire, never been responsible for communications in a situation where lives hung in the balance of every transmission. The weight of the portable radio equipment seemed both familiar and foreign, tools she knew intimately being carried into circumstances she had only imagined. The pilot's voice came through her headset as they approached the landing zone. 2 minutes out. Be ready to move fast once we touch down. We're not staying on the ground any longer than absolutely necessary. Through the dust and smoke, Sarah could see Outpost Charlie for the first time. The compound was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of modest buildings surrounded by a damaged perimeter fence. Bullet holes and blast marks told the story of the prolonged assault, while figures moved rapidly between buildings, some carrying wounded on stretchers. The scene had an urgency that no training exercise could replicate. Master Chief Jackson was waiting at the landing zone, his uniform dusty and torn, a field dressing visible on his left arm. Despite obvious fatigue and the stress of hours of combat operations, his presence remained commanding and reassuring. As Sarah jumped from the helicopter, he immediately guided her toward the main building while shouting instructions over the noise of the departing aircraft. "Martinez, glad you made it," he said, his voice carrying genuine relief. "We've got the insurgents pushed back for now, but they're regrouping for another assault. Dr. Vasquez has the medical situation organized, but we need someone who can coordinate between her teams, our security perimeter, and the evacuation aircraft." The interior of the main building was controlled chaos. Medical personnel worked frantically to stabilize wounded civilians and aid workers, while armed security personnel monitored windows and doorways for signs of enemy movement. The air was filled with multiple conversations in different languages as international aid workers tried to coordinate care for refugees who spoke Arabic, English, French, and several local dialects. Dr. Vasquez appeared from behind a curtained area where she had been treating a seriously wounded refugee child. Her medical scrubs were stained with blood, her face showed the exhaustion of someone who had been working under extreme stress for hours, but her eyes remained focused and determined. "You must be Martinez," she said, extending a hand that Sarah noticed was perfectly steady despite everything the doctor had been through. "Master Chief Jackson says you can help us coordinate the medical evacuations. We have people here who will die if we don't get them to a proper hospital within the next few hours." Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion as she looked around at the wounded civilians receiving care in what had become a makeshift field hospital. Children with bandaged injuries huddled close to adults who tried to comfort them despite their own wounds. The reality of war's impact on innocent people hit her with an emotional force that no training scenario had prepared her for. "What do you need me to do?" Sarah asked, proud that her voice remained steady. Dr. Vasquez led her to a small office where communication equipment had been hastily assembled. "We need continuous contact with the medical evacuation helicopters so we can provide real-time updates on patient conditions during transport. Some of these people require specific medical interventions that have to be coordinated precisely with the aircraft medical teams." Sarah began setting up her communication equipment, integrating it with the existing systems to create a comprehensive network that could handle medical, tactical, and logistical communications simultaneously. The technical challenge helped calm her nerves by giving her concrete tasks that matched her training and experience. The first major test came when Dr. Vasquez identified 5 patients who required immediate evacuation but whose conditions were so severe that they needed continuous medical support during transport. Sarah found herself coordinating between the doctor, helicopter medical teams, base hospital facilities, and security teams who would have to protect the landing zone during the vulnerable evacuation process. Medevac 2, this is Outpost Charlie Medical, Sarah transmitted, her voice professional despite the gunfire that could be heard in the distance. We have a critical pediatric patient with severe abdominal trauma requiring immediate surgical intervention upon arrival. Patient weight approximately 30 kilograms, blood type O negative, will need continuous 4 fluids during transport. The coordination required split-second timing and absolute precision. Sarah found herself managing conversations with helicopter pilots about landing zone conditions, doctors about patient care requirements, and security teams about threat levels, sometimes simultaneously. Each decision had immediate consequences for people whose lives depended on perfect execution. Master Chief Jackson appeared in the communications center with updates that changed everything Sarah thought she understood about the tactical situation. Martinez, we've got intelligence that suggests this wasn't a random attack. The insurgents seem to have specifically targeted this outpost because of the refugee population. They're trying to send a message about international aid operations in this region. The implications were sobering. This wasn't just a rescue operation anymore, it was a strategic engagement with broader political and military significance. The success or failure of the evacuation could influence policy decisions about humanitarian operations throughout the region. What does that mean for our timeline? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. It means they're not going to give up easily, Master Chief Jackson replied. We need to get everyone out of here as quickly as possible, but we also need to be prepared for sustained resistance. They're going to try to prevent us from succeeding. The next hour tested Sarah's abilities in ways that went far beyond technical communications skills. She found herself making rapid decisions about evacuation priorities, coordinating complex medical procedures, and managing information flow between multiple agencies and organizations. Each challenge required not just technical competence, but judgment, intuition, and the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. The breakthrough moment came when Sarah identified a pattern in the insurgent communications that suggested they were planning to use improvised explosive devices to target the medical evacuation helicopters. She immediately alerted Master Chief Jackson and the security teams, allowing them to adjust their defensive positions and evacuation procedures. Martinez, that intelligence potentially saved dozens of lives, Master Chief Jackson told her as they watched security teams sweep the landing zones for explosives. You're operating at a level that goes far beyond what anyone expected. Sarah felt a surge of confidence that was different from anything she had experienced during training exercises. This wasn't about accumulating points or demonstrating technical proficiency. This was about using her skills to protect people who couldn't protect themselves, to solve problems that had no predetermined solutions, to perform under pressure when failure meant genuine tragedy. Dr. Vasquez joined them with an update that highlighted both the progress they had made and the challenges that remained. We've successfully evacuated 12 of the most critical patients, and their transport teams report that the coordination has been exceptional. But we still have over 40 people here who need evacuation, and some of them won't survive another assault. The tactical situation was becoming more complex as well. Intelligence reports indicated that insurgent reinforcements were en route, potentially overwhelming the small security force that was protecting the outpost. Master Chief Jackson was coordinating with base command to deploy additional resources, but time was running short. It was during this critical phase that Master Chief Jackson made a decision that would define Sarah's understanding of leadership and trust. He appeared in the communications center carrying his personal rifle, a weapon that bore the marks of years of combat operations. Without ceremony, he placed the rifle in Sarah's hands and stepped back. Martinez, I need you to take charge of communications coordination while I lead a security sweep of the perimeter. You understand this situation better than anyone else right now, and these people need someone who can make the right decisions quickly. Sarah stared at the rifle, feeling its weight not just as a weapon but as a symbol of trust and responsibility. Master Chief Jackson was entrusting her with capabilities she had never been asked to demonstrate, placing confidence in her judgment that went beyond her official training and experience. Master Chief, I'm not sure I'm qualified to. You're more qualified than anyone else available, he interrupted gently but firmly. Trust your training, trust your instincts, and remember that these people are counting on you to get them home safely. As Master Chief Jackson prepared to lead the security sweep that would determine whether they could complete the evacuation successfully, Sarah realized that she had crossed another threshold in her development as a soldier and, as a person. The rifle in her hands represented not just the possibility of having to defend herself, but the responsibility to protect others and the trust that experienced warriors had placed in her capabilities. The communications center had become the nerve center for an operation that could save dozens of lives or end in tragedy, and Sarah Martinez was now the person responsible for coordinating every aspect of that outcome. The training exercises that had once seemed so important now felt like preparation for this moment when everything real was at stake.